Hello.
Hello.
It's been about a week, and so I figure it's time to connect this. We're back with a
Well done.
I didn't come up with a weird non sequitur that everyone would be confused by.
I like that one. That was good.
Well, then maybe we'll just keep it and do it all the time now. I've decided to introduce guests in reverse order by eye color, and I'm starting with Robert Boyle, the CEO of Planet Networks. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you back. We have another returning champion, Christy Batts, who is the broadband division manager at Clarksville, Tennessee. Welcome.
Thank you.
And that's Light Tube. No, Telehome is Light Tube. You are.
Yeah, we're CD Light Band.
Light Band.
Yes.
Terrible. For people who want to look up Light Tube, the E is lowercase, but the tube, Telehoma Utilities Board, is capitalized. Great work on that logo. Great people there too. Just now embarrassed because if anyone should know the Tennessee networks, I should. So Travis is our co-host. Welcome back, Travis.
Hello. I'm flattered you know my eye color. I never knew that about you. So
I just made that up. And I'm Chris Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And this time we're jumping into the show quickly to get to the topics, to dig right in. Although we do have an image. And so we're going to play a little telecom peekaboo. We're going to see an image that I think Travis might know what it is, but Christy, Robert, and I have just barely gazed upon it. So Travis has suggested it would be a fun one for some reason. So I'm going to ask Henry to throw it up and on the screen here. What are we looking at, Travis?
So I was in San Diego in Little Italy, and I was walking along, and I saw this very actually interesting deployment, how they did their light poles. They have, if you can see in there, they've got surveillance cameras integrated in there. It looks like they've got some sort of wireless access point, because if you look, then between the poles, they did decorative lighting for at night, and then ran what I couldn't tell if it was fiber or Ethernet, but kind of daisy chain between the poles all the way down the street. I just thought it was actually a pretty interesting.
Where's the surveillance camera?
You can see, like, in the second tier down, you see they're at a 45-degree angle looking down. Okay. And they were down on every street, on every corner, all the way around. Yeah, I just thought it was right there. And then if you see that little black antenna sticking down. I think that's a Wi-Fi access point built in there.
You can see two antennas on the top too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. And there's up on the top there. So they must have both 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz they're transmitting out of there. I just thought it was an interesting deployment.
Yeah, I feel like, Travis, you probably learned a heck of a lot about decorative lights. And for a while, they were a challenge for people trying to put Wi-Fi access points on, I think.
Well, somebody spent a lot of money on these. I guess my only issue with these is whatever technology's in there, they're probably stuck with it now, because they're not going to be able to get kind of the best of breed access points to put out there. Plus, if you want to get real nerdy, I'm not a real fan of putting antennas right up next to a metal cowling like they did for, RF propagation. But yeah, this is a nerdy show, right, Chris? I thought we were talking.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, to give people a sense, those towers, those poles are probably what, like $10,000, $12,000, I would guess. They're probably not up in that $25,000 range, I wouldn't think, right?
Well, pre current situation, I don't know when these were bought, so I can't comment on them.
But they're meant to be like decadal long investments, right? Christy probably knows more about this than any of us working for a city.
Yeah, these investment in this, they expect them to last a really long time. They're part of the basic architecture of the downtown look, and they don't expect to replace those anytime soon. We have something very similar in our downtown.
Oh, you do? That's integrated technology into the light?
No integrated technology, because they bought them so many years ago that wasn't even available and an option at that point. But they sure aren't going to replace those poles.
Yeah.
Right.
When we've done downtown broadband deployments, we typically will encourage the downtown people to have business owners volunteer to mount them on their buildings rather than put them on light posts, because light posts, there's a lot of reasons that's not a real great place to deploy stuff. So,
and is that mainly for free Wi-Fi distribution, or are those wireless networks you use for other reasons as well?
For free Wi-Fi for the downtown.
Yeah, absolutely free Wi-Fi.
How much do those? I mean, do you have a sense of what that costs you? Is it kind of like a significant expense that you are kind of like, why are we doing this? Or how does that work? How do you think about that?
For me,
Yeah, both of you. I'd like to ask.
I mean, for us, it's Planet Network's free Wi-Fi, so it's great advertising, and people get on and they say, "Wow, it's fast, it works." And how do I get this at my house? Because half of the consumers call the internet Wi-Fi. Like, I want Wi-Fi
Mhm.
at my house. They really say, "I want internet at my house," but they say Wi-Fi. So we have good Wi-Fi downtown. I want that good Wi-Fi at my house. I know Planet Networks is the company that had it. So from that standpoint, we just look at it as advertising. It's goodwill to the public, and a lot of the people in these areas, they don't get great coverage inside the buildings, so they still have service from us.
If Henry and Rye don't figure a way to get a dash into that word Wi-Fi, I'm going to be pretty upset in about 30 seconds. Christy?
Yeah, we had options of looking at the downtown, but when we began to explore it, it was a lot of historical buildings, a lot of issues related to architecture and that sort of thing. So we chose not to really pursue. We worked with the mayor and stepped away from the downtown area and specifically focused our efforts on the parks, the city parks. And that's been huge for us. And it's the same thing that Robert said. It's, a solid branding opportunity for us. It's that great free Wi-Fi that they want to get in their homes, but it is really isolated to our parks and not citywide.
We've done parks as well, and that's also a great use case. And while we're there, we now have an internet connection. We can also work with the municipality, put up cameras as well. Again,
exactly. Yeah. Security cameras, that sort of thing, and all the parks are all powered by our services.
This is a great question. I want to come to this question in a second from Rudolph Vanderberg. And first, Travis, I'm curious, you have all of those wireless access points. Have you learned anything interesting? I know you're going through a significant upgrade of gear on a lot of them right now, I think.
Yeah, so we're in year 14 of running the municipal Wi-Fi network for the city of Minneapolis. Originally, the concept was the idea was to provide in-home internet service, which was pretty decent pre-Netflix days, very poor post-Netflix days technology. So now it is relegated to free public Wi-Fi for walking around, kind of a wall garden concept that people can log into. It provides advertising opportunity for us because we'll do the old classic pound, so it sorts the SSID at the top of their list. Fiber available now kind of concept. And then periodically, we've had a lot of interesting things with natural disasters, or maybe not so natural disasters, like when the 35W bridge collapsed, when a lot of issues going on around Minneapolis, we'll revert to using Wi-Fi for any sort of communication needs at the time. But it's viable. The thing is the newer radios and newer technology works substantially better than the original stuff 14 years ago. So that's why in the San Diego model, I'm a little concerned about the pole aging, but the pole itself is not aging. So it might just end up being a brick technology in another 5 years for them.
The question then, have any of you had challenges with this electricity issues, availability?
A lot of times we've found that light poles do not have 24/7 power. They're usually centrally switched there's a box somewhere in a basement of a store in the storefront, or there's something on a light pole or whatever, a timer. And so we wind up having to do is put little electric eyes in all and change all the light bulbs as long as it's possible to, put them in line with the light bulb. And then that way we can pull power out of the bottom and keep them on all the time. And then they just go on and off with daylight sensors.
The rest of the question has to do with wind and the challenges of that. Christy, what are your experiences with that? And you have the benefit of, I think, just being able to wave a magic wand and solve power issues, right?
We do. We've had the same challenges everyone else has had. They're on timers. Parks close at certain times, and then the lights will go out and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, we've had the challenges too for any sort of external power that we tried or in the early days, rig up to get them to work properly. We had issues with homeless folks unplugging them and plugging in their portable heaters to them, and then in turn cutting off the network. So we've had all of those kind of challenges that is everyone's faced early on, but we found some ways, like Robert said, to avoid those with new technologies and being able to power in a different sense and isolating our power sources as well.
So I want to just that was a thank you, Travis, for suggesting that photo. It's a fun digression. I want to note for people who haven't tuned in before that Travis runs a fiber company in Minneapolis, that Christy runs one of the early municipal fiber optic networks, a citywide network, a network that is old enough that if anyone out there claims that Chattanooga was one of the first, I think a lot of folks in Tennessee get a little bit chafed about that, because a lot of y'all certainly were fiber to the home before they were. And
Yes.
And so we embrace everyone's success, but there were some pioneers out there ahead of time. And then Robert Boyle is in New Jersey. And generally, I think of you as connecting the less denser parts and rural parts. Is that the right formulation?
Yeah. Kind of small towns with 8,000, 5,000 people in them, typically somewhere in that range, to super rural areas where you've got 20 or 30 square miles with 400 or 500 residents. So
excellent. So Christy has said that you're growing quickly, and that's posing some challenges. We're going to get into more technical discussions about how these networks are designed and things like that. But let's jump in there and talk about how growth is how you have to deal with that, because you're a network that has been fully built out, right? Like you should be in sort of like just rent harvesting right now, right? Not having to solve these technical challenges.
You would think, but as I've said before, when we've talked, Clarksville's kind of a little bit of an anomaly. We're home to a university, Austin Peay State University. We're also home to the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell. The military base is actually at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, but the largest portion of the landmass is on our side of the state line in Tennessee, and most of the soldiers and their families live in the Clarksville market. So it's an ever-changing, ever-growing market. Our economic development has just been off the charts. We have a Google data center here. We have LG, washer dryer manufacturing firm that's manufacturing the smart washer and dryers. Hankook Tire, which is a South Korean tire manufacturer. We just acquired an Amazon distribution center. So there's tons of growth and lots of new jobs coming into the market. And so we never seem to stop growing, which is great. We love that from a utility perspective, electric and internet broadband services. We want it to continue to grow. But keeping up with that is the biggest challenge, and keeping up with, how to continue to sustain that constant growth. The staff that I have working for me, we often say, well, when things settle down, we're going to do. And now we just laugh and say, things are never going to settle down. We have been averaging on a slow month, 600 new connects a month. We top out when there's new troop deployments coming in, or the university is starting up for the fall, upwards of 1,000 connects in a month. So it's constant work to keep up with that.
Do you have to roll a truck for like a quarter of those? Like how many of those are in areas where you just have to flick a switch to get them reconnected?
From an electric perspective, 100% of those are we fully deployed fiber-enabled smart meters, and so all of those are 100% just flick a switch. For the broadband side, it really depends on the type of service. We do now allow customers to do self-installs. So if the property had been previously connected in any way, shape, or form, then it's an easy plug and play for internet. Even for TV services, a little bit of that we still do with streaming. We allow that to happen, but again, there's some areas that were never wired. Some properties that were never wired, and we'll talk about that a little bit with the challenges on the MDU side. But we still run into that almost 15 years later, and so we still roll a truck probably for about 50% of those. So I keep a staff of 12 installers, one-man crews, and then maintain another staff of about eight crews on a contract basis for the ramp up times.
That's it's an interesting approach. I mean, I think I want to get into the topology, because one of the questions I've asked Travis before, not really understanding all this. I mean, I feel like in my mind, the ideal situation is like a home run from each person, each end point of the network back to some sort of CO. And then when you have way more homes than you expected, then you can't do that anymore. And I know that you have an active network, Christy. So how do you deal with the growth that's coming in?
Well, and that's where the challenges are coming from. Today, if a 300 to 500 homes are being built in a new subdivision, we pull 288 count fibers or whatever the fiber teams deem is necessary, because we provide a fiber to every property because of the active Ethernet scenario. And each of those fibers will tie back from the property to a hub site that we maintain strategically. We have 38 of those that we maintain throughout the system. So it's an expensive proposition to do that. But it has been the thing that set us apart from everyone else. I mean, everybody's got a gig now. Back in the day, not everyone had a gig. Now everybody's got a gig. But our gig's a symmetrical gig, and it's your gig, and you're not sharing it, and it's not split, and it's not any of those things. And that's what's set us apart from our competitors. And it's also allowed us to, provide the top level service that they expect from us. The other advantage we have, if we're among friends here, I guess, is that we are the utility. And so we require the developer or the builder to pay line extension fees per home that they build. And so that helps reimburse the utility for some of the costs related to putting the conduit in and the fiber in for these new properties. So that helps offset some of it. But it's an expensive proposition to continue to do that. And when you get into right now today, planned and platted in this market, there's over 2,000 new single family homes being built that will be ready in the next 12 to 18 months at the latest, and 6,000 MDU doors being built that'll be ready in the next 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
And that's an expensive thing to keep up with.
It is, but it's also exciting to know that someplace in the United States is building new housing. So that's nice because exactly. I don't know about you, Travis, but when I look around up here, it seems like we're not doing so much of that.
Oh, no. Remember, I live in Arizona in the winter now.
That's
so
right.
You mean you Minnesotans up there in the frozen? No.
So Robert, I think you use more passive approaches, right? For the most part, I mean, you use both, but as well.
Typically, businesses get larger businesses get dedicated connections. Schools, governments, those organizations get a dedicated fiber connection. We find that GPON works really well for our use case for most of the areas where it's rural. We're going pretty far with it, and we're trying to kind of deploy on the most economic basis as possible. And most people are just not using that much bandwidth, really.
Do you chafe when Christy says the thing that I hear from so many active folks that they deliver a true symmetrical connection?
Well, I mean, ours is also a true symmetrical connection.
I thought you'd say that.
Yeah, I mean, can everyone get that same speed all at the same time? Then we've never run into an issue where a single customer has run a speed test and said, I'm not getting the speed I'm paying for. We only do 1 by 32 splits. So, and you got 2.5 gigs down, 1.25, and now with 10 gig XGS PON, we're not selling 10 gig service over XGS PON. And we're selling 2.5 gig service. We're selling 5 gig service. So the reality is that people are, even if 2 people or 3 people are doing speed tests, the other 2.5 gigs is more than enough for all the other 32 people using the connection at the same time.
Sure. This is a good chance for me to remind vendors that if they want to send me any 10 gigabit home, Soho kind of switches to test out, I'm open to that, because I think this is the ultimate joke of everyone who wants more than a gigabit is that none of us have home networks that can support it yet.
Exactly.
Some of the stuff's starting to come out. You're starting to see 2.5 gig capable little switches, but it's trickling in. Like Ubiquiti has some stuff, but there isn't much out there that you're not buying it for $99 at Best Buy.
Right. So, so there we have, I think, there's 2 different approaches regarding generally. And I think, for people who are less technical, I would just briefly say that, on an active network, you basically often have 1 fiber per person, and you're able to make sure that that person is never going to deal with contention, with their neighbors and things like that. On a passive system, like GPON or the XGS PON, there is a possibility, it's incredibly slight, that people would experience a slowdown. It would be a fairly small slowdown. And I think, we don't want to get into a sort of a which is better kind of thing. I mean, there's trade-offs to it. And if you're in a rural environment, trying to deliver a fiber to everyone's door may not be the best use of your money. But I do want to talk a little bit more about how you're specifically dealing with things that I don't understand as much. So Travis, I don't know if you have any specific technical questions as to how they solve different challenges on the network.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is even in an active network, you have contention points further downstream. So I don't think it's kind of a black and white kind of, one is potentially as contention versus another one. I mean, if your uplink from your switches in the CO or in the hub are saturated, then all of your active customers are as well. So I think really it's proper network management, proper oversubscription, make sure you have enough capacity in all tiers of your network are very important. So for us, we run an active network, and the predominant reason we do that is to be vendor agnostic. I think the mistake the GPON vendors made is they don't always play together correctly, one vendor to another. But now with XGS PON, that's more of a standard, and it appears that the vendors are going to play nicely to each other. So we are currently testing XGS PON for areas where we're maybe a little fiber light and predominantly in a residential area. I think that there's a plausible, there's a possibility there. I never wanted to get trapped into somebody's ecosystem. That was always my biggest fear. And plus, it's pretty simple. I mean, if you've got 1 fiber running to a house, I mean, honest to God, you can put a visible laser down it, see it come out the other end. If you didn't do maintenance, you're only taking 1 customer down versus 32. But I will tell you, it is a incredibly expensive way to deploy a network. So that's a huge negative. And if you're starting out and, capital is a constraint, you can build GPON networks that maybe can be upgraded down the road if necessary. With XGS PON, and now there's 25 gig PON coming out, you may never have to. It was just at the time 10 years ago when we chose the direction to head. That's where we went. And I'll tell you what, when a fiber hit on a backbone cable happens, oh man, you don't want to be running an active network. Oh, geez.
So I was curious. So if someone puts a backhoe through that fiber that has 5,400 strands, does that take just hours and hours and hours to get reconnected then?
Days.
Days.
So our largest span, like going under rivers or going, through areas, is 6,912 fibers, I think. You do everything in your power to make sure that does not get hit. And this is a part of the operating a fiber network that goes very underappreciated, is the locating the watchdogs to make sure that when people are digging next to your stuff, you have somebody there. And then, off you go.
Yeah. So, Christy and Robert, any reactions to that?
No, I agree with everything you said. I don't think anything. I mean, and In different situations, we would use active. Different situations, we would use passive. It's just most of our areas are very rural. We're doing this on a limited budget, and so for us to deploy active, it would cost them. My calculations, it looks like it would cost us about 2 to 3 times as much as deploying GPON, and 99.9% of our customers don't notice it. We run even to these rural communities where we're serving. We'll run a 72 count or 144 count fiber, and we'll use 12 or 24 fibers. So my guys can overlash 2 miles in a day. So if we need more fiber, and we always have extra fibers really close. So if we need a dedicated connection for someone, we can do it in a day. It's not a big deal because there's always extra fiber throughout the network. And we're a member of the 25 gig GSPON MSA also. So we're working toward that, and 25 gig GPON is probably end of this year stuff is going to start shipping. So,
and Rudolph is correct. Yeah, you can run active or a point to point and XGS-PON over the same fiber, different wavelengths. So, yep.
Christy, is there a power difference from your point of view as you're looking at this stuff, or do you just have, as the power company, do you have endless power, or even view it as a benefit to use more and more power?
Well, we have to pay for our own power, so yeah, no, it's not a benefit, but and we don't get a discount. But no, it's not. There's not a huge power difference, and in fact, what we're finding, I think, is that the XGS-PON equipment that we're looking at for some of our expansion and growth areas will actually take less power. You're going to go down to a chassis based system that's going to serve about 500 customers out of one card, as opposed to serve those 500 number of customers. You're probably looking at 20 to 25 switches in the active scenario. So yeah, it's definitely going to be less of a power draw on our system.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Christopher.
No, please, you.
Are you using 24 port switches or 48 port switches?
48 ports.
Oh, you are? Okay.
When I was first learning the difference between active and passive back in the days when GPON was brand new, I think there was a sense at that time, one of the challenges, at least from the person I was learning from of active, was that you would have to have more hub sites that required that power and air conditioning then and all this other stuff that went along with it. Is fiber cheap enough now that you can run that back to more centralized places where that's more economical, or am I just misremembering and misunderstanding the whole situation?
I think it could be in some scenarios, but it really depends on your density in those areas. And then it also depends on your length of your runs, because you start to have, a lost budget that starts to affect your performance on that. So, we ended up entering into this with originally there were 32 hub sites. We're up to 38 now. And partially that's because when we build a new substation on the electric side to manage and control the growth for electric, we'll slap a hub site in it, and because we know that fiber growth is going to come out of there as well.
That's got to be nice, Travis. That's the part that you don't have to, that you get to deal with, is finding the homes, the other places you can buy a place to secure for your hub sites.
Oh, I'm so jealous of what Christy has going on. Yeah, we have to hunt around, buy something, tear it down, build it, because we're overbuilding in the city. How long has the Twin Cities been around for, Chris? It's and so we're like last to the game right now. So,
and we buy properties as well all over the place. So
let's jump into that question quick and ask Christy, what is a loss budget?
Well, when we talk about it from our perspective, is it often depends on the length of the run on the fiber from point A to point B, from the customer's home back to the hub site, and is it too long that you start to lose your light readings on it, and they start to degrade the signal quality. We try not to have a huge run back from one hub site to the next. Right. And then one of the things that we've been really exploring and the team's been looking at is what does that mean for us in some of our areas when we convert to the XGS system, is when we're taking that same run and splitting it 32 ways is that going to create problems with our loss on our quality for the service?
Now, I'm presuming that when you buy the fiber, different fiber has different characteristics, and then also the electronic system that the vendor that you're using probably says this will go 10 kilometers or something like that, and then so
Yes.
you probably don't
And the
want to go more
optics
than
as
9
well.
kilometers, right?
Yes, and the optics as well. Yes.
So most of what we do with active is 20-kilometer optics.
Mm-hmm.
They cost, for 10 gig is what, $12 or something now. But if you go, so say $12 or whatever for a 20-kilometer optic. If you go up to a 40-kilometer optic, that's $60 or $70, and you go up to an 80-kilometer optic, and now you're talking about $180 or something. So the difference in the equipment per subscriber is significant when every single subscriber needs $360 worth of equipment versus $24 worth of equipment. I mean, exactly. I'm not counting the switch. I'm just talking about the optics.
Right. Exactly. We are, we do have the luxury of being, pretty dense. So we're not as rural probably as you are, Robert. And so we don't have to worry about, longer spans as much as some others do. But it is something we're cognizant of and are looking at closely when we start to move to the XGS PON.
Yeah. So one other thing, Chris, you said about the different fiber providers or different fiber companies, the lost budget or whatever. And I mean, differences in manufacturing, or whether it's Prismian or Corning or AFL or whatever, those are almost irrelevant. I mean, you're talking about, a couple dB for our purposes, but we're talking about short runs. If you're talking about building fiber across the nation, and whether you want your repeater huts every 200 or 300 miles or something, that's a different story. But when you're talking about what we're talking about, there's almost no difference. One good splice versus one bad splice can make more of a difference than the type of fiber.
Exactly.
Now, Travis, when we were at Nanog, you were getting different orders of products and things like that, and I barely tracked what was going on. Do you want to talk about some of those things?
Well, so probably, I assume, Christy and Robert, you guys are both running BiDi.
That was one of the things I had no idea. Bidirectional, I was guessing.
And bidirectional. So the 100 gig BiDi optics are starting to hit the market. So real quick, for people that are just starting to buy it or starting to look at building a fiber network, don't make the mistake I make and cheap out and try to buy the 5-kilometer optics. 20 kilometers should be your minimum. Even if you only think you're going to go around the block, by the time you go through all your splice faults and all your slack and everything else. So I made that mistake and had to replace about, 600 pairs of optics, just because I was trying to save $1. So anyway, so back to the 100 gig BiDi. Yes, 100. So 1 gig, 10 gig, readily available, very inexpensive, high quality, no issues. 100 gig BiDi optics are now starting to become available. And so that will be the next, I don't know how Christy hooks her hub sites together, but we hook our COs together with bonded or lagged 100 gigs. And if we can do it over a single fiber versus 2, that just, gives us effectively double the capacity.
Is it BiDi as opposed to SiDi and TriDi? Like
TriDi, yes. Okay. Bidirectional, yes.
So one thing with what Travis just said, and this is a real advantage of active over passive or GPON. So if I have a particular group of 32 customers that's on GPON and I want to do XGS PON, I need to either upgrade if the proprietary vendor that we're using for GPON has a 10 gig option, we can do that, or I have to get coexistence optics, or I have to change the equipment at all 32 sites, all those 32 customers, and do it and coordinate it so that they're not down. So that's kind of a downside to doing upgrades with GPON, where if Travis or Christy have a customer that wants to go from 1 gig to 10 gig to 100 gig, they just get somebody on both sides, change the optics, and in 30 seconds or a minute or whatever, they're back up and running at the faster speed. So
I think this was a seed that Christy had planted when we were talking about the show. Was you had an example of a school and how the way you built the network really allowed you to do a rapid upgrade when it was needed.
Yeah, and it was 42 schools within our footprint. Again, large growth community. We build a new elementary, middle, or high school every year. in this market. So, but we had 42. We had the school systems bandwidth. We were their bandwidth provider, and we have 42 locations. The school year 2019 school year started with about 50% of the students in the classroom, and then 50% of the students in a virtual classroom learning from home because of the COVID restrictions and everything else. On day 3, I mean, we were delivering them a 10 gig connection with 1 gig point-to-point connections to each of those 42 locations. They were cranking along prior to that just fine. On day 3 of that 2019 school year, their CIO contacted us and said, I need to move to 20 gig. Can you do that? Within 2 hours, we had them moved over to 20 gig because it was that easy. As Robert said, you just go out on either end and you change things out. And it was the main feed that we changed out because we dumped into their central offices, that 20 gig. We spent the entire following summer because they wanted to move all of their point-to-point connections from 1 gig to 10 gig. We spent the entire summer changing the connections and upgrading from 1 gig to 10 gig. And then when they started the school year, their primary bandwidth feed moved from 20 gig to 40 gig. And so they're running the entire school system and have also created a elementary, middle, and high school that's virtual in the system as well, so that we still have a large portion of students that take virtual classes as well, and it's all run off of the 40 gig. But it's that scalability, that flexibility that Active brings to the table that's so nice to have, especially for enterprise level and large commercial customers.
And just to be clear, we 100% agree with that, and all of that for us is all Active as well.
Yeah. And we'll keep that as we go and start to move for our growth areas into the XGS-PON world. Our Active will still be the core of our system, and that's where we'll house all of our government buildings and university and school system, and all of the large entities will still be on an Active scenario.
Why are you moving to the XGS platform?
To really manage the growth, and it really stemmed from when we talk about our growth too, in addition to all of the development within our area, we just had recently an annexation into our community too. So when there is a law in the state of Tennessee that if you are a developer and you're developing in a non-incorporated area that bumps up to an incorporated area like the city of Clarksville, and you want to annex that in, and the folks that are moving into that area or that are living in that area, if they will agree to that and sign a petition, then you can be annexed in, and your area, your property now becomes part of the city and not part of the county. So we had that happen for an area just outside of our service territory. It had about 300 homes already being serviced with electric from our co-op, but no broadband. They had not built broadband at that point to that area. And the developer that led the charge to get them annexed in was also developing a MDU property that was going to have upwards of 900 units on it. Well, interestingly enough, it sits on the opposite side of the interstate. We have our interstate system runs straight through the middle of our town. It sat on the opposite side of our interstate system. And to service those 300 homes and the impending apartment complex, MDU, we would have had to run 4 288 counts, 4 to 5 288 count fiber counts across the interstate, which is a huge construction project and a nightmare in dealing with Department of Transportation and permitting and all those great fun things. And we were all just dreading it. And one of the staff members, one of my senior engineers, came to us with this XGS-PON scenario. We took a look at it. We began our testing on it. And we are now in the process of building a single 96 count fiber across the interstate to service that. We've tested the XGS-PON system in our labs, and then now it is being deployed out to friendly customers in that general area to be able to test for us, and it's performing very well. We've not seen any issues related to the bandwidth. My biggest fear was, how is it, am I going to still deliver if they want a gig? Is it going to be a gig? And is it still going to, perform the way my active system has performed? And so far, it's doing great for us. We've not seen a change at all.
The only thing, as I understand it, the only thing more fun than building across an interstate is when you're doing it and you drop the conduit halfway. Right, Travis?
Oh yeah, or you pull 6 back and you only get 5. That's another problem, right? Yeah. Oops.
We have a great question. We have our guest will be joining us in a second, but before then, I just want to run this question out. Average traffic levels per sub in your networks, off the top of your head?
A couple megs usually, average.
Right.
Yeah, this is the dirty little secret of running internet fiber networks or internet networks. So ours Sunday night, 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time. Monday night, the same time, or what we consider our peak consumption. We run about. So you got kind of some logical breaks when you get past 10,000 customers, when you get past 30, and when you get past 50,000. So at over 50,000, we see about 2 megabit per subscriber. 81% of that, though, is going to local caching or local PNI peer or local IX kind of traffic. So, and we don't need to delve into that today. We've talked about that in the past a little bit, Chris. But if you build your network right, there's not a lot of consumption per user, but the whole, there's a tremendous amount of consumption.
And Christy, those numbers line up that way for you too?
Yeah, about the same. We right now have 3 100 gig egress connections. And that's really primarily for failovers in case we have any issues. But typically at peak times, even with caching and everything else that we have in place, we'll hit about 80 gigs of traffic through the whole customer base.
Mm-hmm.
So
we don't use any caching at all. We have the benefit that we're really close to everything being here in New Jersey. So we're on all the major internet exchanges. We also have peering out in Los Angeles, and we're also in Europe, but most of our traffic is here in New Jersey and New York area. And so anything Netflix, Amazon, Apple, all that stuff just goes from us to 1 or 2 routers away and on our network, and then goes directly to whoever that is. So most of that traffic is coming or going directly off our network to wherever it's going.
But it is a good point, though, again, for people that are looking to start a network or build a network. If you can get to an internet exchange point, that is your number one goal. And then if you can get there, then you can get your transit providers as well. Whoever that's going to be servicing that. So, yeah, geographically, I don't know, Christy, what you guys have down there, but I know, Robert, I mean, you're where you need to be. So we're like in Minneapolis, we need to go to Chicago to get to a lot of the content.
yeah. Most all of ours goes Atlanta and Chicago, Nashville, Atlanta, Chicago. So we don't have anything. Closest we've got is Nashville, and it's not even most of it leaves Nashville and goes to Atlanta then.
And I'm convinced, quite frankly, this is the number one challenge for rural providers is getting this transit and transport services out of their community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of rural communities here in New Jersey that we want to serve, but I have to build 60 miles of fiber to reach them.
Exactly.
No fiber in those communities. So
We've brought Jim in. Jim Troutman. Do you want to introduce yourself quick?
Hi, guys. Jim Troutman. I am Director of Technology at Tilson Broadband, which is part of Tilson Management. We have a small fiber to the home network currently in Vermont. Companies based in Maine. I'm in Maine, and I also happen to be the director of the Northern New England Neutral Internet Exchange, NENIX, and we are one of those IXs that Travis was just talking about.
Excellent. We can't talk about these things too much, or Reed will attack me for not having him on, because I would definitely want to have Reed back on when we dig into those.
By the way, Reed, I'm not ignoring you. He's emailed me a few times. I'm not ignoring you, Reed. But Jim, you must have the finest collection of O'Reilly books I've ever seen, just by the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I had to thin it out a little bit to make it fit on the shelf.
We're going to talk a little bit more about MDUs and the various challenges of dealing with them. Jim, I wanted to start with something that you and I had talked a little bit about, and I feel like I'll just hand it over to you if you want to jump on a soapbox for a second. This is not as technical,
Right.
but I hate it when I hear that public housing is just going to solve the broadband problem by throwing a bunch of Wi-Fi radios in the hallways. I don't think any of the ISPs here would try to sell services in an apartment building that way, and I don't think it's appropriate to try to solve low-income connectivity challenges that way. And I think you and I agree on that, so we can start there as we start talking about MDUs.
Oh yeah, no. The way I look at it for public Wi-Fi, it's like having a boarding house.
Sorry, you just start over for a second. Your audio just cut out a little.
Oh, sorry. So the way I look at it, it's like having a boarding house. If you live in a boarding house and shared bathroom, shared kitchen, if that's acceptable for certain types of people, most people don't find that acceptable anymore. Everybody wants their own bathroom and their own kitchen. So why should it be any different in public housing? Why should you have a shared Wi-Fi, which everybody in the building is on, and you can't set up your own personal network for your own IoT devices, things of that nature. So I'm really not a fan. It's definitely better than absolutely nothing, but the way I think of it is it's really like a guest network in a corporate office.
So that can lead us into this question of how we do solve MDUs, the technologies that are possible, as well as the various other political and various challenges. I don't know if anyone wants to, Christy or Robert, if you want to jump in to share some of your issues. Robert, do you even have to deal with MDUs?
We do. We actually, in a lot of the towns that we're in, there are MDUs. We have great relationships with every single one of them except for one. The one is owned by, I don't know, some investment group out of the area, and all of the ones that are locally owned, we give one of the key things is with MDUs, and anyone who hasn't been in this business or is just watching this who hasn't dealt with this, if you have a house or even you have like a small apartment like a multifamily house, 2, 3, 4 units or whatever, it's pretty easy that we can just put a box on the side of the house, drill a hole or run it on the outside or whatever and go into your unit and provide you with service. If it's a large, brick or concrete box or whatever, and we need to get access to some conduit that's inside a closet locked in the basement, and then we need to run cabling through all the hallways to get there and through other riser cables that are into other locked closets on other floors, and only the super or the building owner or whatever has access to that, we simply can't get access to your unit without the cooperation of the building owner and or super, and sometimes one wants to help but the other one says no. So and it doesn't necessarily mean it's one or the other, but
because you really need to sell the whole building. I mean, you have to get every last person, but you really have to be able to go big in the building, right?
So we have approached it 2 different ways. We've approached it in some cases where we will go in and wire up just 1 or 2 people who want service. And that's kind of the start. And then it kind of starts this viral effect where everyone says, oh my God, that's amazing. How do you have that? Because mine's horrible. My DSL is 2 megs. How do you have gigabit speeds? And then you start getting a lot of people, and then we say, hey, contact your building owner, management company or whatever, and then talk to them. And then we'll do it kind of right and put something in every closet on every floor and kind of have a structured cabling system and build it so that it's really easy to turn up customers and it's something that makes sense. But without access to the building, we can't do any of that. So what we do in those buildings typically is either the management company or the landlord will already approach us and say, hey, we need to do something for our residents because nobody wants to rent in my building because we don't have good internet access. And in those cases, it's great. Listen, we'll come in, we pay 100% of the cost. All we need you to do is just give us access, and we'll sign a multi-year deal with them for building access. And as part of that, we give them free internet for their video surveillance and free internet for the super, their management office or whatever. And that's typically a fair deal for everybody. And, it helps us. And then they let new tenants coming in know about our service. And, over time, we wind up getting the majority of the people in the building. And that's kind of in a good, healthy, productive relationship where it's mutually beneficial for everyone. In the other ones where the people are kind of absentee owners, it's just a hassle to them. They don't really care. And unfortunately, a lot of those buildings are all Section 8. They're all low income, and they're people who don't have any economic voice. They can't move out. They can't say, hey, if you don't let these guys come in, then we're going to find somewhere else to live, because that's the place that will take them in the area. And so unfortunately, those are the people who suffer the most. There's a rule for OTARD, which is that anyone, the FCC years ago came with this ruling saying that anyone who wants to can put an antenna on their apartment balcony or whatever, and that the landlord and the municipality, nobody can say anything about it as long as it's in a private space for them. They can't attach it to the common wall, but they can put it in any space that's exclusively theirs. And I think what you need is kind of almost an OTARD type ruling for access to those types of buildings that are large enough that it's a problem. But I don't know the solution without being very heavy handed. And so that's not really a great solution either. But
no, but I like the idea of giving the free service to the super, and along those lines, it seems like a good solution. I wonder, Christy, like, is that even something you would be allowed to do? It's one of those things where the public entities have often much more strict requirements as to whether or not they can do things like that.
Yeah, we don't do that, and a lot of it is because of restrictions. We have, we have all of us have the wonderful layer of the FCC regulations, but we have the extra added layer of TVA, who's our power provider, and now that they understand that broadband's not going to go away, and most of their customers are going to be in the broadband business, they're getting their hands into a little bit more on the regulatory side for us. So we don't typically do things like that, and we had a real challenge when we started up several years ago, in that because the way we were doing our service, everything was wired with Cat5. And so we were having to go in and completely rewire all the properties. And, if they're built on a slab, you're looking at, no way to get in unless you wrap it pretty much in Cat5, and it looks horrible. So we're locked out of a lot of MDUs and a lot of private owners. We've worked really hard over the last few years to build stronger relationships with the developers and the builders in the market so that we get in there as they're building. And we've got several that don't necessarily do exclusive deals, but they won't allow anyone else to wire the building but us. And so that helps us tremendously. We've got some that we've gone in and wired completely the buildings with the understanding that we would be offering services there. And we turn around and look, and one of our competitors has also wired the building. And wow, suddenly they have an exclusive to be in there. So we've run across a lot of those challenges. One of the things that benefits us, that's interesting in this market too, as I said, there's a lot of folks that move into the market. But what happens a lot with our military and our university group is they'll come here not necessarily knowing what part of town they want to live in. So they'll rent an apartment in one area. And in our community, because of folks with their being stationed here for short periods of time, some of the apartment complexes will do 3 and 6 month leases. So they'll come in, sign a 6 month lease, figure out this is not exactly the property for me. I don't want to live in this one. I'm going to go over and move to this one. Because they've got that ability to move around a little bit more in this market, what we're finding is if a property owner or manager doesn't let us in, we just kind of let it play out for a little while, and the tenant demand will usually create a phone call to us because they're wanting to move into that particular property. But when they find out they can't carry their service that they had at another property with them, and it starts to get a little uncomfortable for the property owners. So we usually get in on the backside of it. With these new plans that we've got, and the way that we're redoing some things with the XGS pond that I talked about, we're working very hard to have a set standard of how we're going to wire everything and going in from the ground floor up on all of these properties, and so that we're able to reach all 6,000 of the new doors that are coming.
Travis, the points that Christy was just making echoed what I feel like I've heard you say before, which was that basically nothing has helped you get into MDUs like a rise in vacancies.
Yeah, when vacancies are near 0%, landlords have very little motivation to let you in. But as vacancies go up, we get more. They get a little easier to work with. So we group them into a couple different categories. We have what we call small MDUs. These are 4 units or less. We find those are relatively easy to get into, and we do like what Christy does. We let the tenants kind of drive the conversation. Um, and when the tenant's driving the conversation, the landlord tends to be in that small MDU demographic, seems to be, I'd say 99% of the time, we can get the unit wired. But we require that we wire every unit in the building when we're there. We found it challenging, and I'd be interested to hear Robert's position on this. They're constantly rolling the trucks back to do onesie twosies is very expensive and really doesn't provide the customer experience we want. We want a customer experience where you simply plug in and you're on with a minimal amount of hurdles to go through. The large MDUs are interesting because, again, it's all about, we try to make market awareness. We try to make sure that when people are looking for units that they understand the value we provide, and they will go to units that we serve. So, but we do very similar to what Robert does. We give free connectivity to their surveillance cameras, to their entry access systems, to their office, anything to do to get in there and wire all the units. And again, like Christy was talking, we have a standard universal footprint we put in every single building. And on new construction, we get in there when it's still dirt, and we're part of the conversation and get those cables run while the walls are exposed.
In our area, every single developer comes to us because they know that if they don't have Planet Networks in their building, they won't be able to sell or rent their units.
Yeah, that's where I want to come to Jim for a second as we talk more about the technologies that are possible. But I did want to note that this is my impression is that a lot of people want to see the FCC solve this to enable more competition, although often not in buildings that you've conveniently found a way to lock others out of. There's always going to be. I think you're always trying to get into some buildings and play defense in others. And ultimately the landlords just have so much power, and like that's the way the system works. And I don't know that the federal government can do anything to force open those doors. San Francisco developed an ordinance, and that solved the issue for about 80% of the MDUs, from what I understood. And then 20% of the building owners were like, "Sue me." Like, whatever. Like, I'll take you to court. I'll happy to deal with that. So like, there's no perfect solution.
I don't want to jump in front of Jim, but real quick. I'll start with this. I do not want to have a relationship with a disgruntled landlord, and if the feds are strong arming to let us in, no thanks. I'm just not interested in that kind of relationship. We're there to provide a higher quality service, higher level of customer service, and the landlord should want us to get in so that he or she can rent more units.
Yeah, no, that's I wouldn't have thought of that, so I appreciate that point.
Yeah.
What I want to throw to Jim is, you can go ahead and answer that, and then I'll come back to the technology thing because it looks like you're ready to roll.
Well, I've seen instances where landlords have said, "Hey, we want to offer this as an amenity. We want to pay you a larger flat rate."
Your sound is cutting out every now and then. It's just cut out again. I don't know.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, I can hear you.
So yeah, having the landlords actually wanting to offer it as an amenity service is something that I'm seeing more and more often. There's also the problem, of course, with a lot of these legacy buildings where it's an old building. It was wired, decades ago. And as everyone said, it's very difficult to run new cable in some of these buildings. So as a stopgap measure, there's definitely some technology out there, such as VDSL systems to use the copper within the building. There's also MoCA, use the existing copper.
Right after you said MoCA, you dropped again.
It may be my Starlink connection. Unfortunately. I'm sorry. But MoCA is a good alternative too. If you have access to the coax, you can actually deliver gigabit level service over existing coax. It's certainly not fiber, but it might get you started for the first year until you can go back and get the building wired.
But Go ahead, Robert.
I'll say we tested it in our lab. We tested it, and G.HN is even better than Mocha. And in the lab, it works great. We found in the real world, it just makes us look bad. So we will not do anything now unless it's fiber to the unit or Ethernet to the unit that we have installed. We've tried the other technologies, and like I said, in theory, they're great. And it's definitely better than DSL, and it's probably comparable to cable, but it's not the fiber experience that all of our customers expect and that people expect of us.
Yeah, usually I've seen it when I've worked with other ISPs in the past. It was like a transitory thing. You'd say, well, here, we can give you 100 meg service, and you know, because we want to get you online right now, and then we're going to get you fiber as soon as we can.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that I've seen in trying to work through some of this issue in more public housing situations is it's not just inconvenient to go through building materials, but you can't without like pulling a bunch of permits, because if it was built in the 70s or earlier, it's got hazardous materials that you can't just expose people to. Now I've seen all kinds of cool things, like I have this on my desk at work, the OFS with like a thin fiber in the molding that you can't even really tell is there. You know, it seems like there are a number of solutions along those lines, but then trying to get through the walls can be a challenge, I'm guessing. But I guess so the question I had about the cabling was, if there's a coax cable, it probably belongs to an incumbent, right? And you can't, even if you wanted to, you can't really have multiple providers sharing a coax cable, is my understanding.
Correct. Yeah. It varies. Typically, I've seen lots of buildings where the building owner put the cable in as part of the construction, and the cable TV company, you know, made use of it, but it was actually the owner's cable. It gets a little murky, but generally, you know, if the owner says you can do it, then we do it.
Sure. Christy, have you had any of this fun? You have these, I'm sure, a lot of older buildings up there.
We do. Oh, hold on a second, guys.
The lights went off.
we do. We've had some of the same challenges all over the place related to older buildings, not being able to get service into them, not being able to wire. All of those kind of challenges that everyone else has faced. It's one of the reasons why going into this huge push for growth that we've had. We're looking at some new technology. Well, probably not new technology for everyone else, but for us, it certainly is, with going in with a microduct type system, and then ruggedized fiber into the system, and so that it is a lot easier, a lot faster install. But most of the older properties around here, like I said, we ended up having to either figure out creative ways to run the wiring and not wrap the building without, you know, attic spaces and firewalls and that sort of thing. I
guess my last question related to the MDUs is, to me, it seems like point-to-point connections on roofs to deliver high-capacity bandwidth to these, it seems like it's pretty good. You know, I understand that with fiber, you have a lot fewer points of failure, but if you can get, you know, if you can drop a gig on an apartment building to split up among 50 units or something like that, that more or less solves the problem, right? I mean, you get some incremental improvement by having an actual fiber, but is it really that big of a deal?
It's a big improvement for sure. And there's certainly ISPs doing that. You look at NYC Mesh in New York, of course, they're a not-for-profit, but they're using that model very effectively. And I think Monkey Brains in California has done a lot of rooftop wireless, and to some success. You know, obviously everybody wants fiber, but I love rooftop wireless if it's you know, a stepping stone to getting your fiber.
Well, and let me give, I know Robert and Christy both looked at the radar way, and I'm sure Travis has things to say, but when I was talking with Monkey Brains, one of the things they told me is they've had a number of customers sign up, say they wanted fiber, and Monkey Brains said, we can do wireless for a few months while we figure the fiber situation out. And then many of those folks just said, you know what, after a few months, this is fine. I'm meeting my needs with that rooftop wireless. And so they then said they were just going to, you know, not push it.
I think with good quality wireless gear, point to point especially, there's no, you can't really tell the difference between that and a fiber connection. But the biggest issue is the inside the building. I find that's way more of a problem than getting fiber to the building, in our experience.
Yeah, and so if anyone's confused, I mean, in both of these situations, you would be using internal wiring of the building to distribute the signal in the building, and we're just talking about getting it outside. And the reason for that, in part, is because like wireless often is not able to get enough of the signal through these building materials to actually work well inside the buildings.
Well, let's make sure we caveat that though, because the difference between like GPON and active Ethernet, very small. The difference in wireless technology is about as broad as you can get. So
you mean between different vendors
and technology? So I guess when I hear rooftop, we're talking line of sight. We're talking like Ciclu or higher quality products. We're not talking like micro tick here, and I'm just saying. So we got to be real careful when we talk rooftop. But the irony of the whole thing is the indoor component of it is the same. When we do a line of sight point to point, rooftop to rooftop, we build it identical to a fiber layout in the building. Just the egress happens to be coming through the roof instead of through the ground. And then when we roll by with fiber, we just unplug the wireless and plug in the fiber and nobody even knows the difference.
Travis, you might not be a Minnesotan in winter, but unless you learn how to say rooftop to rooftop, people are still going to know where you're from.
Yes, rooftop to rooftop. Yes, and I apologize. I hung out with some Canadians for the last few weeks, so I picked up a couple of their nuances too. So,
all right, well, let's move over to Christy, eh?
Well, and we've not done any of the rooftop to rooftop type scenarios. The challenge was if we could get into the building, we were going in the building. If we couldn't physically get into the building, even offering a rooftop to rooftop option wasn't what we were still restricted from inside the building. Our challenges were always, we just don't want to change anything. Competitors are working fine for us. We've got great relationships with them, that sort of thing. So we really focused on the areas where we could just physically get into the building and do what we needed to do with our traditional setup.
Travis, you unmuted yourself.
I'm just, I would say when people are doing their business models and they're laying out kind of their geography and they're running past MDUs, I think we're in year 12 now, and we still have hundreds of buildings we've been unable to get into. So just it's a slow process to get to them all. Just do not assume that you're going to get to them immediately. The other thing, like Jim talked about, that's become a lot more popular in the last 2 years is bulk deals, where the landlord simply wants to buy for, and be the ISP inside their building. So build that into your business model as well.
So with a few minutes we have left, I want to throw it open. Any kind of technology, any aspect of the business plan, are there things on the horizon that you're waiting to see play out that you're really interested in right now? I want to start with Jim.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about a technique I've seen some ISPs in very rural areas like Maine do, which is build your fiber network in the village where you have the density, and then use a licensed backhaul to feed your village. Because in the very rural areas, a lot of your cost is getting to the village, and that, like a licensed microwave, really lets you get those customers quickly without all the expense.
Yes, this was something that I had suggested years ago with some of the mountain areas of in Colorado, where there's sort of like this area where it makes sense to do fiber to the home, but getting there was prohibitive, and I was like, well, you should do fiber to wireless to fiber, and as a non-technical person, it was just like, why don't you just do that? And I guess that's more feasible now because they didn't think it was such a good idea at the time.
Yeah, licensed is key. Just as Travis was saying, you got to have good quality equipment to do point-to-point wireless. If you have good equipment and it's licensed frequency and it's set up correctly, it'll run very well.
Well, and you're talking about areas where there's not a lot of interference likely, right? You just have to worry about pines, I'm guessing, getting in the way over time.
Well, rain is the other thing.
And capacity too. How much throughput can you get through this wireless link? So if you have a fiber network that's wildly popular and wildly successful, and you're onboarding customers like crazy, just like we talked about the contention issues in an active E and a GPON network, that might be your issue, is now you don't have enough wireless backhaul to get you back to the fiber.
Yeah,
So,
I'm envisioning, 50, 100 homes from what Jim said,
okay.
not like, 3,000.
Okay.
A couple hundred maybe
Remember,
at most.
you get everyone in these rural areas. If you bring a high quality product to that area, you get like 90% uptake in the first year. So just
I
be
don't know.
ready.
Jim seems pretty partial to that Starlink.
I am on my local community broadband committee. Hopefully, we're going to have some sort of fiber to the home solution in the town where I live. But up until Starlink came for me last year, I had spent the last 8 years on a 4 meg DSL connection. So I couldn't even work from home most of the time.
Ouch.
I was just reminded of a comic. It was actually, they're talking about on the Security Now podcast, which is a great show from the Twit Network, about the guy who shows up at the gates of heaven, and St. Peter is there and says, you're supposed to go to hell, but it looks like you spent a lot of years coding in assembly, so we'll call it time served. 4 megabits, we'll call it time served, similarly. Christy, curious about any technologies on the horizon you're keeping an eye on and excited about for one reason or another.
Well, I think that the biggest thing for us, and it's not really on the horizon probably for some other folks, but the biggest thing for us that we're taking a look at now is more opportunities to sell additional services to our commercial customers. And the focus that we're playing with now is the LTE backup. So we're looking at getting into that business. And it sounds weird for us to say, okay, when my service goes down, I've got this other service I'm going to sell you in the background. But with the commercial customers that we have in this market, we're very retail, restaurant intensive in this market, keeping them up with their point of sale options and what their services for that is important. So we're digging into that and going to begin the testing of that service in the next couple of months.
That's mostly aimed, I'm guessing, at that sort of like that point of sale where they don't need a whole bunch of capacity. They just need to make sure they can run credit cards
it's up all the time. Yes.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with, I work with a consortium group for our video programming. And the biggest challenge I think we're going to find is getting that LTE service contract. Do I go get that myself? Do I find a partner to do that with me? And so I was talking with my video consortium group and was sharing with them. I said, look, on the video side of our business, it's declining every day. We've offered streaming and it's coming along, but you're still losing customers on the video side to cord cutting all the way around. I said, why don't you go negotiate me a contract instead of negotiating the next contract with ESPN? Go negotiate me a contract with an LTE provider, and you get in the LTE business, and bring me back something I can live with for pricing. And so we'll see what happens.
Excellent, Robert.
Have you? Oh, sorry, real quick, Christy. Have you talked about building your own CBRS network, or are you thinking of using somebody else's LTE?
Using
network?
somebody else's.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me as a good time we have this interesting market disruption with AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, all trying to figure out where their future is. I would try to get a long-term deal, I feel like, because now is the time to do it.
Yeah, we offer phone services, and one of the ways that we help pull customers over from the ILEC is we say, listen, we're providing the fiber, which you've had for 2 years and you've never lost service, but we're also going to give you a LTE backup that's going to back up all your phone services, and that's not even on our network, and it's going to use AT&T and Verizon, and we charge a nominal amount for it, and it's just the extra peace of mind, but also helps sell the VoIP services that otherwise they may be hesitant to switch to. So as far as new technology, I mean, we're always looking at things. There's nothing giant that jumps out at me to mention. Sorry, I just don't have anything huge to mention. So.
All right, I just want to see what number Travis will put in front of the letter G for the technology he's really excited about.
Hey, am I that transparent? So for the end user, 2.5 gig will be a real thing this year. Finally, there will be decent routers that are actually available. We'll start to see Wi-Fi 6E access points rolling out for to augment our home mesh network. 400 gig on the backhaul will be a real thing in 2022 here, but sadly, and it's just more of the same stuff with just a bigger number at the front. Chris, you are correct. I will tell people the one huge surprise I had for 2022 is the cost of IPv4 IP addresses are at an all-time high. We're looking at right around $50 each right now. So I would tell new people that are getting into this to seriously consider rolling out initially with a strong IPv6 deployment, or your CapEx costs are going to be much higher than you're anticipating. So that was a new find in the last week.
Yeah, 53 to 56 is the most recent quote I got for IPv4 per address. So yeah. Get your IPv6, guys.
When we were at Nanog, wasn't that November? It was like 25 or 30, wasn't it?
So we paid
2 years ago.
2 years ago. So we paid $23 each 2 years ago. This year, $50 each. So it's a big number. If you're I don't know, Christy, are you guys doing CGNAT, or are you giving out IP addresses to all your subs?
We're doing CGNAT.
Okay.
Our whole network is dual stack. We're still giving out IPv4 addresses. We have enough address space to last us for the next year and a half, probably. But
okay, that's good though.
Because
I've considered CGNAT, but I'm kind of old fashioned. So there's no tech support calls. So do you find any challenges with it, Christy?
Not really. I mean, we've pretty much done that almost from the very beginning. We were in a CGNAT scenario, so no real issues with it.
No PlayStation or Xbox problems or anything, or UPnP or anything. Nice.
No.
Oh, that's great.
One thing I would say, if someone's starting out small, like Jim mentioned, some of these small towns where you're going to provide service to 200 homes or something, assuming you're in North America, log in, create an account with Aaron, and get on their waiting list. They are still handing out /23s and /24s. So you can get address space for, well, I say free, but for whatever Aaron's $500 fee is or whatever. But for companies like ours, where we need another /18 or /16 or something, it's a totally different story. But if you need small address space to start your little rural ISP, you can get address space. IPv4 and IPv6 as well is totally free. So,
and I would highly recommend you do that.
We even negotiated one of our carrier deals for one of our egresses for a /23 to be included in it that we buy from them.
Cool. I just wanted to note one last thing as we're getting ready to close down the show, and that's that if Christy's not having problems with CGNAT, I gotta think that you have more gamers on your network than anyone else. Military base, the college, there's serious gamers on your network, I'm sure.
We do.
All right. So
the vendor matters. Which CGNAT solution you use matters a lot.
And that is a very valid point, Jim. Do not do a low cost solution. Is going to be my assumption.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming. I've greatly enjoyed this. Jim, thank you for being our special mid break guest or mid show guest. I don't know what we're doing, but I think it's really fun to add someone on in the middle of the show. Wonderful to have you join us. You've been great in the chat room. Always appreciate your contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Travis, as always. Thank you, Robert and Christy. Next week, we are going to be back with, Travis, do you remember? I can't remember. These are...
They're new folks. We don't see them very often. So
and
I hope they're good. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to be mean. I don't think they're ever going to come back. Doug and Kim.
We've gone the whole show, though. We've gone the entire show without you finally answering the question. I won the chicken wing bet. Is that correct?
Yeah, my time ran out. And
and the FCC did not increase the 25.3 in the last week.
If they did not tell me.
Okay.
Or anyone else.
All right, I'll be home tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it. I will go to the bank and get cash.
And the way chicken wings are now, you might want to get a loan. So.
Come to Maine and we'll feed you lobster and oysters.
Much better.
Are you in Maine?
Yes.
Oh man. All right, forget the chicken wings. We're heading to Maine, Chris. So
Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys are welcome anytime.
Oh no, Travis, I need to find the time. I need to pause time, because if I didn't have a 6-year-old son, I would be driving across the country with Travis, doing my job remotely and visiting all kinds of networks and learning stuff. So.
And I want to commend the Wi-Fi quality. Have you noticed? I haven't knocked
You've been
out
great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for the folks who came. Thank you, I don't know, Mom and Dad, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Connect This.